It's time once again to delve into the Marvel and DC dimensions on Grudge Match, the show that brings together the graphic gladiators of the comic worlds to compete in single combat to crown the best of the best. Today's match is a brutal beatdown between two hand-to-hand and close-quarter combatants who copy their opponent's moves and make them their own. From Marvel, it's the mercenary with photographic reflexes, it's Taskmaster, and from DC, the villain bent on revenge against justice itself, it's Prometheus. Not only are both of these characters baddies who like to get up close and personal with their opponents, but both have made a name for themselves by studying the top fighters of their worlds and mimicking their fighting skills to perfection. So taking a look at them individually, starting with Taskmaster, first created in 1980. His real name is Anthony Masters, and he discovered at a very young age that he had photographic reflexes, the ability to study the physical movements of anyone and mimic their movements to perfection. He used these abilities to have a very promising football career in high school, but decided ultimately to turn to a life of crime rather than a life of heroism, as he felt there was more money and more lucrative opportunities in doing so, and he's always been a very morally ambiguous character. Now, Taskmaster started off as a trainer for a lot of super criminals, and at times has even trained SHIELD officers and superheroes, as anytime the money is good enough, that's what he will do. He doesn't really have a good or evil orientation, he's just a mercenary for hire. Now, throughout the years, he has been able to copy the fighting styles of some of the greatest fighters in the Marvel Universe, including Captain America, Black Panther, Daredevil, Iron Fist, and others. He's also able to copy some skills that some would classify as almost superhuman, like the throwing ability of Bullseye to take any random everyday object and throw them with incredible power and precision. Also shooting from the likes of the Punisher and bow and arrow shooting from the likes of Hawkeye, so allowing him to have incredible accuracy. To back up his considerable fighting skills, he also carries a variety of weapons and armor. His entire body is covered with armor and face mask that allows for a good degree of protection from damage, from cuts and impacts. And weapon-wise, he carries a replica of Captain America's shield and has copied Captain America's shield fighting technique perfectly. He also carries a sword, and he has copied sword fighting techniques from the likes of Swordsman and Baron Zemo to use these to very high level of proficiency. Also carries other things like various thrown weapons, shuriken and throwing knives, billy clubs, batons, nunchucks, and the like. Despite the fact that he isn't rated as having any actual superhuman powers, he can mimic superhuman abilities for a very short time. By watching footage of fighters played in fast forward, he can actually mimic super fast movements, although this is very taxing on him and he can only do so for short periods of time before the strain overtakes him. Using these skills and abilities, he has become one of the top mercenaries and one of the top fighters in the Marvel Universe. Prometheus from DC Comics, first created in 1998. His real name has never been revealed, but his backstory is that he was the child of career criminals, and he saw his parents gunned down in front of him by police, and from that moment onward, he decided to get revenge against the entire justice system and anyone and anything that stands for justice and law and order. His backstory is not unlike that of Batman in that he went all around the world training his body and his mind to the heights of perfection in order to go back home and met out his own brand of revenge against those he sees responsible for the death of his parents. So he traveled the world learning different fighting styles and different strategic techniques. He's also a polymath genius. He's gone to various learning institutions as well. At one point, he was taken in by the Shambhala monks, who gave him access to alien technology, actually gave him access to the famed Phantom Zone of DC Comics, which he uses as an occasional means of teleportation from one place to another, or as a place to store his wide assortment of technology and weaponry. Now, he has developed an enhanced combat suit that specifically has a helmet that ties directly into his nervous system with an advanced computer system embedded into it. Now, he has used this to study up the fighting skills and techniques of some of the DC Universe's top-tier hand-to-hand fighters, and since it ties directly into his nervous system, he can mimic the fighting abilities of the top-tier fighters to perfection. So he has studied up on the likes of Batman, Lady Shiva, Nightwing, Deathstroke, and some of the other most prominent hand-to-hand combatants of DC, and he has them programmed into his helmet to allow him to mimic their fighting styles to perfection. In addition to these fighting abilities, he also carries a wide assortment of hand-to-hand combat weapons as well, such as batons, occasionally edged weapons, and throwing weapons as well. His suit can utilize nanotechnology offensively against his opponents by affecting his opponent's cognitive functions, and he's used this to temporarily shut off the superpowers of some of his enemies, especially those who rely on intense focus and concentration to utilize their powers, such as being able to prevent Green Lantern from creating constructs by disrupting his ability to concentrate and focus. He also uses things like strobe lights in his helmet to disorient and even hypnotize opponents occasionally, but most often likes to fall back on his hand-to-hand combat techniques, as his abilities in those arenas have allowed him to take on the top-tier fighters and even sometimes superhuman combatants, because the AI in his helmet can formulate strategies that can allow him to take on multiple superhuman opponents in split-second timing. So having taken a look at these two combatants in more detail, it's time to determine what would happen if they were to cross paths and go into one-on-one competition. Winner's going to be Taskmaster. The reason Taskmaster takes the win of this one, these two characters are very similar in their ability to mimic the fighting ability of the top-tier fighters of their universes, but it comes down to whose skill in that arena is more embedded in them. It comes right down to it. Taskmaster's ability to mimic fighting skills is an inherent ability that's tied to his muscle memory, whereas Prometheus's is a computer program tied to his helmet, and when that helmet is removed, he loses that ability. It is possible to remove his helmet, and that distances him from his ability to mimic the fighting skills of characters like Batman and Lady Shiva. That's not the same for Taskmaster. Even Prometheus's nanotechnology and ability to disrupt his opponent's ability to concentrate wouldn't really affect Taskmaster's abilities, because his photographic reflexes are muscle memory. They don't require concentration, they don't require him to focus. Once he learns an opponent's fighting skills, he's capable of recreating them effortlessly without really having to think about it at all. Another thing to consider is that in the JLA Avengers crossover, Prometheus and Captain America ended up fighting one-on-one, and Captain America came out victorious over Prometheus. Now, Taskmaster has copied Captain America's fighting skills to perfection. So if Captain America is able to top Prometheus with his fighting skills, it stands to reason that Taskmaster, mimicking those fighting skills perfectly, could do the same. Add to that the previously mentioned ability of Taskmaster to push his speed, reflexes, and skills to vaguely superhuman levels for brief periods of time could give him the extra boost he needs to get the drop on Prometheus. And that gives Taskmaster the win of this competition. So message me down below, let me know what you think of the outcome of this fight, and as always, suggestions for future Grudge matches. We'll see you next time on the next edition of Grudge Match.